Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well. I hope it's a nice evening or daytime wherever you're at right now. My day's been going pretty well. I had a good time with people who I love, and I even managed to get some things done that I was hoping to get done today. So it's been pretty good. I've recovered some energy that I may have left behind during the week, and I'm ready with fresh ideas and a definite feeling of eagerness to get started today. So today we're going to continue working on our desert scene here, which somebody called the chasm, which I love. I've been calling it Desert Overlook, but it doesn't particularly have, I guess, a firm title yet. But we started. Maybe I can take you through some of the phases that this has gone through, but actually I don't really have those graphics up right at the moment, so I'll just say that this is all very hazy, and the first thing that we painted was the first thing that we painted in detail was this area in the foreground with the snake, which was a request. So I spent a lot of time painting this little snake, and I say this every stream. I am learning as we go, so I try things. I experiment. Sometimes I like what I did. Sometimes I'd prefer to do something else. And this was my cute little snake, and I'm very proud of it. And it's sitting here, looking over the cliffside here down at this scene. There seems to be an open desert in the background, and I've just been kind of making it up as I go. At some point, last stream, pretty much at the start of the stream, I decided that I was going to create this chasm with water running in some underground area just underneath. Maybe this fell in as a sinkhole. And there's a little bit of a lip here, and there's a cave beyond. That's been carved out by this water running through. And I've slowly been working on little details in the background, coming forward, trying to build up a structure for this little valley here. Some of the colors are more golden around the edges, and the colors in the middle seem more faded. So one of the things I want to do today is to start congealing this painting in its value more towards something that cooperates between all these areas. So you've got red over here, we've got golden colors near the sides, and coming from the open desert there are these lower saturated colors that come in, and in the middle we've got the only real noticeable blue values in the painting, and that's probably going to remain shocking. So I like to put something that's very distinct but subdued somehow, and so I have that here. This idea of a chasm sort of collapsed in came to me as I was falling asleep, when this was still just a solid floor. I saw this middle of the painting just collapsing in on this water, and I decided that must have some deep meaning to me, so I went with it. Hey dude, thank you for joining the stream. This stream is going to be a little bit higher quality. I increased the latency from low to normal, so there's about a 10-second delay. But given the pace that I paint, that shouldn't be too much of a problem. I should still be able to respond in time. This isn't exactly a first-person shooter, so... Alright, let's get started. So, last time, I think I was just putting in some details around the edges. And I was working on this area down in here where it's sort of broken and collapsed. And I'm going to continue around the edges right now. And I'm going to work with some texture still to sort of bring out these forms and edges and get rid of some of the fuzziness so that we can move on to light and shadow, color value, and things like that to sort of bring this piece closer together from all of its different hues. So, with that in mind, let's get started. So I hope everybody's day has been going really well. Feel free to chime in with any little stories or anything from your day, anything that stood out, seemed like it was meaningful or important to you. Or if you've had any weird dreams lately, you know I love to talk about dreams. I can talk a little bit about what I had for dinner, and it was an absolute feast of... I went out for dinner and I had an absolutely fatty meal with this. It was called the Porky's Smackdown Bowl. And it's at this local restaurant that's, I guess, a chain called Billy Roy's. And I'm not paid by them, but I really enjoyed my Porky's Smackdown Bowl. And really filled me up. So, plenty of energy for this drawing since it's been hours since then and I'm not suffering from any kind of food coma. So my usual technique that I've been experimenting with is just to create some texture on things and then come back over with an overlay brush and kind of add some kind of contrast to that. Yeah, it was delicious. Absolutely peak. Peak and nosh. I wish I could tell you about my dreams last night, but I didn't really remember them. I slept a really long time. I was just up really late last night and got up. I did a little work. Some other people who I work with were also online because it's sort of a really critical phase at work, so I happily just joined in. I know, it's like working on the weekend, but in this case, I'm very proud of the things that I get to do, so it actually was kind of uplifting to solve problems. It was like puzzles, which I think I was saying last time. I feel like I solve a lot of puzzles, to do my job, which is a great way to get me through the day, to think about it that way, so... so I did that today. Besides eating gratuitous amounts of food, I watched some old episodes of The Price is Right. Which is always really entertaining to watch stuff from the 80s. And sort of what was popular, how much things cost. Some people find that to be a depressing topic, but I think it's alright with me. If you know me at all, you know that I often find silver linings in things that are even very depressing topics, and I think in my first stream I was even talking about death. Not sure, maybe I was like particularly somber when I was saying that, but all true, all same things are still true, I guess. We just go all over the place with what we talk about in here. Hi, Egg. Nice to see you in here. Let's see. Dude, you said you don't remember much about your dream, but you know it was about making a video game that you really liked. That's awesome. Maybe you can find some great inspiration from that and vibe code up something, or, legit code it if you're old school. Old school being only, 2 years ago. It's nice to see a couple familiar faces in here. Egg and Dude. It's the Egg and Dude show. Alright, so I have to make a decision about how this connects over here, and I think that I really would like to have this sort of have another layer to bring this together. So I'm going to put that here, and then I'd almost like to have maybe some kind of rock or something here where it rises up just a little bit. I feel like that'll make it connect a little bit better. Maybe an indication that there is actually a cliff face that's beyond view here. And I'm painting really zoomed out at first and coming back in and doing details. I guess I'm feeling a little bit musical tonight. Almost a little bit goofy. I'm really eager to get my Live 2D persona in here soon. I think that'll be really fun and engaging. And put up little faces and stuff when things are happening in the chat. Oh, I've got a little bit of a buzz. Let me take care of that. I need to replace that XLR cable. Trying to make it last as long as I can, though. A few more layers in here. Clean up these edges a little bit. Decide where it actually meets the cliff here. Even a general color is just fine for cleaning up an edge and then coming back and adding a little bit more texture. I very rarely, when working in like landscapes like this, do I use like multiple layers. I don't know. I just, maybe the way that my mind flows. Yeah, it's gonna be fun to play with that character, the Live 2D character, when it comes. Of course, I've never really played with one before, so I've never really had a regular stream before, so much less one with a little character. It's gonna be super exciting. As I mentioned before, I think instead of like where many streamers are dealing in games, I'll probably just keep returning to some of the same pictures and adding to them, taking little requests and adding little things for people, and I was thinking that at some point, maybe even tonight, I could just throw a layer on and start adding goofy things that we're non-committal to as a sort of a final picture. I thought that'd be fun to do little versions of pictures with like extra goofy things that were requests thrown in. It could be really anything. Like if somebody told Bob Ross to go ahead and put SpongeBob into a picture, and he's just like, okay, I don't understand, but I'll do it. That would be so much fun. Let me not compare myself to the great Bob Ross, as I've done multiple times. Guilty. Right, so now I'm going to get some shadows. If we do goofy stuff, okay, if we do goofy stuff, the snake has to be given a top hat and a pipe. Oh, absolutely. Make him into a rattlesnake Jake? Holy cow, I've heard Rattlesnake Jake, and I'm afraid I was buried in a cave for that bit of history, cultural history, so you're gonna have to remind me exactly what that is. Feel free to bully me over that one. I feel like I need to move this my view of the comments somewhere else, because every time I look over my voice does this because I'm not facing towards the mic anymore. Okay, so I kind of, when I hit it with things with overlay, I kind of go between white and black to work with what's already there, and I find that that draws out such great texture in the things I've already painted. And I should probably come a little bit closer. So even if I haven't actually painted in the detail that I would like to represent, it picks up colors and things already there and just kind of adds this amazing texture with the values that are already there. And I really love that. So shapes and things start popping out at me that then I can go and refine. I like to do things so to the picture so that the picture starts leading me in a direction with natural objects and starts suggesting things to me almost, because I can't make a rock or anything else really, like but a rock can appear if I see it, you know. So there's a rock, there's like a little shelf, so I can extend this little shadow of that shelf over, borrow that shadow, start moving it around. So peak. Peak! 100% must watch. Yes. Good. Good call. I will break into that. This all over here is just pure fuzz, so let's work it into something. I believe this is the top of a rock here. So I'll just go ahead and go with some black, come back. That way you'll see just a touch of dark to help give that some definition, which I then promptly go over with some light color. I'm making decisions on the fly, I guess, and said, no, you know what, I like that, so. That's actually good. I've been looking for some movies to watch. Just in downtime when I'm just feeling like muttering to myself and zoning out and letting something take me away. I recently, I don't know, a few weeks ago, I was watching like the Bourne trilogy finally, and some of the other movies in the Bourne series. And finally knocking those out, which I'd started to watch them in the past, and I kind of life went some other direction, so didn't finish them and finally did. Another movie which I finally saw, it's just an absolute classic, which is Grosse Pointe Blank. Really enjoyed that. That was fun. Started to watch some bad movies too. I watched like Leprechaun in the Hood, which I don't know, it's just so bad. It's actually kind of difficult to get through. Put some tumbled rocks around too, because it looks like this area looks a little stressed. Got some folds down. Borrow some of those shadow shades. Put some shadow down here under these. I won't worry too much about the shadows because I like to add those with overlay brush. Happy Saturday night, everyone. If it is your Saturday nights or Sunday morning. Tomorrow I'm going to go spend some time with my grandmother, and that should be fun. She's an absolutely wonderful woman. knows, maybe I'll even get something really productive done tomorrow. Or maybe I will do some me time and go ahead and watch Rango. Switch out a little bit. That's looking pretty good. That's about what I was aiming for. Let's do some work with little details, rocks, things like that that might be chilling here on this little surface. And I'm actually going to do shadows with this overlay. Oh, maybe a little bit too dark there. I was using entire overlay layers and decided to instead just use the overlay brush in a lot of these places. Found it to be just a little bit more versatile. And I don't have to remember to merge my layers, so that's nice. There are some differences to doing it the other way, but this tends to get the effect that I'm looking for. Deeply surprising to hear that some people haven't watched some of the movies that I put on a pedestal. Well, you're aware of it. I don't think that that's really that uncommon. The movies we watch, books, television shows, anything, any kind of media or thing like that, that's out there. We kind of make that part of ourselves sometimes, and it affects us, and you just kind of imagine that effect is just broad and must have influenced lots of people. And I think that we do that with things that we feel like have positively affected us. And we, more than anything, just want other people to have that experience too. This almost looks like this rock is sloping down into the background here, so I'm going to go with that. Give these areas that are shadowed a little bit of life. I'm going really small with my brush here. piece of rock. This is my rocky. No sneak under my rock. This almost looks like somebody just arranged these rocks this way. Maybe I'll kill one of them. This looks like the kind of place you might try to make a little fire. Maybe in a little bit I will actually put like a little fire ring in there. Some evidence of habitation, or at least just an overnight stay. Okay. Back to overlay. Put some shadow in here to make this look a little less hazy in the foreground, make it look a little bit more deep in the background. So much horizontal layering in this one. Really fun. Actually going to do some erasing. And does that work? It doesn't really work that way with the overlay brush. It would work that way if I had an overlay layer. So, maybe the thing to do is actually this. Bring back just a bit of the rock layers. There we go. Give it a little definition. definition again to some of these stones that are here. Apparently here. I just saw them in my mind's eye and I said, yep, those exist. Deciding how I want this sandy layer to terminate at the edge. What rules do I want to apply? For one thing, some of the sand would have certainly fallen down a little bit, caught on some of these ledges. Maybe it would have piled up a little bit where there's a recess. Maybe we could put even a bit more sand down here. Zoom out a bit. Take a look. I think it looks nice. A little hazy in here. Maybe even take some darker shadow in there. I think this is the bit where in the first painting I actually put some green, and you can still see some of that green in there. There's almost this like sickly green over here, which I'm realizing also this is really hazy here, and you can't really see where it doesn't seem to definitely terminate, so let's give it some definition. Yeah, there's some strange colors in there. Things I don't think would really be intentional, so that's great. Some new suggestions in here for our palette, start borrowing from them at the detail level. Since I have some reds in here, maybe this rock in this area has a little bit more iron, so I'll even add some of that to some of these layers that appear at the edge of our sinkhole. Take some of these black dots out from where we were going a little nuts, just blacking out part of the painting. Thank you, dude. I'm glad you enjoy the way it looks. Bring some of this sand around in a more gentle way. So, let's even just dash this with a little more sand so it doesn't quite stand out quite as much. Now there's this thing here. All this is very brown. And I almost wonder if I can get away with using the color brush a bit. Start bringing in some of that color, like that, at least near the parts where I think there would have been more influence. Oh, that color does look a little dingy. Let me pick something more like this. Maybe this color brush isn't really doing what I want. Back out some of those changes there. Would overlay do it better? Yeah, I think so. I think overlay will do the job nicely. I don't mind some of this being more brown like that. I think you see real situations like that. One thing I do want to do though is pick up some of these details that are sort of in the dark, because this lip isn't quite as deep as maybe I originally thought. I think it looks better if most of the collapse actually stops there. Oh, we're still in overlay. Let's go back to normal. Kind of jumping around here. tormenting boredom. Not that this isn't really fun or interesting, it's just I go, ooh, and I want to work on that. Ooh, I want to work on that too. Let's take a look what we're actually painting here. So this would have collapsed in here a bit. I think this is actually a bit higher up. Probably needs to be represented that way. Just a bit more. Maybe even with a bit more shadow. Because this is kind of on a slope here. There's a slip that happened here. And maybe there's some slight piling of sand. A little bit of a slope right here. And some piling up right here. Where sand has slipped in. Started to fill in some of these areas over here. So we can soften that a bit. And sand would have piled up here a little bit too as it filtered down. And the way I'm thinking about it is that the course of this, like this, would have taken a lot of sand with it. But that doesn't mean we can't indicate that there is sand that is still kind of trapped in little banks inside of here. Occasionally sand would have escaped the river. Been allowed to dry out a little bit, not just stay as mud. Work on some of these plates in here so that there's a little bit less of a haziness to it. And excuse me for just one. trying to remember to breathe tonight. As I focus, I forget to breathe. Yeah, I hope you're noticing maybe that the stream quality is a little bit better just because I've changed the latency. I kind of had a major little crisis about it, like, oh, well, I don't want to put in a delay, but then I was like, well, how long is it between things going on, and could you not just change that later if you felt like you were not fast enough? I was like, okay, well, we'll up the stream quality. Because it is more about the art. I guess that's where I have my sand piling up. And the sand is slipping. I should really make more process features of that slipping. Even if they're very subtle. Little sort of pillows of sand as they pile up. Even at the edge, there would be a pillow. And occasionally that pillow would fall, all the pillows would shift. The sand on the slope is not really smooth. There are ripples and pillows of sand where they form a stable point and then form a sheet, depending on the slope. I remember as a kid I was playing on sand dunes a lot, being privileged enough to live near an ocean, and not right on it, but close, and being taken there and then running up a sand dune and watching all the structures as it slipped down the face. I'm still not sure I can depict it right, but it's fun to try. Seems like I'm doing an okay job. Maybe less pillows, more sheets. I'm making a bed here. Sounds like I might be tired the way that I'm talking, but I'm not really. Just texturizing a little bit as I see areas where I want the eye to perceive something solid. Giving edges here and there. Deepening shadows in places. Here's a rock. That's a nice little rock. Let's come out just a bit. I like these sheets. And I'm going to continue making some up here. I think they're a great way to show sand motion over time that's been shifting down. Such subtle features, but I think they make it a little bit more believable what you're seeing. Soften these scrappy edges here. And just look for a moment. Looking left and right. Obviously put so much detail on the left now. It's still not quite where I want it to be. But at least it suggests what should be there. The only thing that I see that is a big problem over here is this. This stacks down, and then it seems to come out, but then it shouldn't be laying on the ground back there because it's above these layers that are touching here. So there really needs to be more structure underneath it. It's a little perspective problem you have to solve. But it gives me an opportunity, actually. So the edge of this rock needs to have a more defined edge. And there needs to be some real shadow here where this rock actually I've created a problem. If this is coming down like this, then this is actually here. It's actually terminating here. It's not in the background. So this is actually shadowed in here, which I'll quickly do some shadowing here so that I can remind myself pretty easily of what I'm actually painting. I love funny little things like that. And you're just painting way up close and you don't notice at first, and you're like, oh, I've created an impossible object. That's fun. But it's also kind of fun that I've created this kind of a darker stone here. And it gives me an idea to actually continue that left because it's in the layer. And give this stone a darker shade and put sand back on top of it a little bit. These deeper shadows, which I'll borrow from down here. The impossible desert. I did it on purpose. I wasn't sloppy. Hi. Thanks for the hearts. Oh, there I was a little sloppy. Okay, so I think there's just a little too much contrast here, and I want to give it a little more of a solid feeling. So I'm going to use overlay and deal with some of that by giving some macro structures with shadow going across layers a little bit. Oh, that was a little too harsh. Give it more of a broken appearance and the larger scale. And then coming back in with a finer brush and touching this up so it looks a little bit more like a realistic surface. God, I love doing stuff with the overlay. Okay, and nope, still dealing with overlay. That is a pretty eye-catching slab I've created. I almost wonder if the rest of them should actually look like that. But I'm going to constrain myself right now to creating more defined edges of this rock. Follow that down. And do that for this rock too, I think. Oh. Cut into my rock a bit more than I wanted to. Put some texture in here since I'm looking at it. There we go. A little bit of dimension. The spots. Like the shade. Catch some sand. Okay, so I've produced some pretty pretty darn golden hues, and there's some pretty faded stuff in here still. And I keep coming back and looking at that. And trying to decide how I want to use that. And while I think about that, I'm just going to keep working on some other areas here. This is a good time to use the overlay brush. And this will help me to see some suggestions of palette to use for defining these little rocks and stuff in here. So it's not actually providing all the detail, just kind of suggesting what I might do. I think I want to clean up this edge a bit. Hello, Mr. Snake. Nice to see you again. I see no reason why this couldn't be brighter up here. Let's go ahead and create some details here. Some plates. More defined edges. Borrow color I like here. Probably should go pretty dark in some of these areas, like under this rock. Start shadowing in. Decide what is going on over here. I would like this to continue this direction, and I would like this to be here. And there's probably a further shadow here. Make sure I'm not doing anything impossible, as I am way zoomed in. I think that this is pretty dark in here. Maybe some rock edge exists here. And this is certainly very dark in here. In general, probably all over this painting, I need to be a lot more bold with my shadows. There's some places where the light will reflect off of bright sand and illuminate, give definitely one of those hallmark kind of looks of desert, where you have bright sand illuminating the reds and other colors and the stones, the iron and whatnot that's in the walls of the stone, where it exists, right where a wall exists right next to a bed of sand. But there would still be cracks hollowed out from wind blowing sand chiseling away at the rock. In a digital anyway, it's better to just go ahead and use some shadow in places, a little bit liberally, and then paint back. I think on a real canvas that's more difficult because you have to think about what you're painting over if you're planning on doing that. I almost feel like this is too distracting, but I think I called a pile of poop last time. I'm gonna make it a little less distracting. It's something just out of frame, and I'll work on it in a minute because it kind of frustrates me. Sometimes make little enemies with part of my paintings because they just never feel right when I'm working on those little parts. And it becomes clear what I should do with them later, and then we become frenemies. So I guess this is sloped here. Why not make it sloped? This is supposed to be a rock that terminates here. So let's do that as a shadow. Doesn't quite reach all the way over there. And even though this isn't the right color, we will come back and fix that. Because now I can see the edge of that. I'm going to add some golden hue on the edge just to kind of pick that edge up a little bit. Texture here, more definition to the edges. Yeah. Excuse me. This blends so much into this background that I may just pick up the tone a little bit here. Agonizing over one rock. It still looks a little strange. Looks too perfect. Like maybe a van that's buried. Mess it up a little bit. Maybe even add some of these sandy sheets. Other lines. To give it a little bit more reflection. Deepen some shadows on this side. It's a little better. Let's move over here. Clarify a bit of this. I like this bright hue, and I kind of want some of it here too. At some point I'll go back over this whole painting and make decisions about some of these regions that are like sand covered and how I want them to be treated across the whole painting instead of focusing so much on just one rock or the other. Bring it all kind of together. Decide in 3 dimensions what I'm kind of looking at here, so I'm going to solve a little bit of this with my overlay black. Yeah. Clear up some of this mud. Chisel in where there's shadows so that it actually looks like there's a 3-dimensional structure. There we go. That's something to work with now. I hope everybody's having a good time. I like to think that you could just turn the stream on in the background, do something, come back and check, see what we're doing. I'm just really sharing my enjoyment time, my moments of peace that I have in my day. It's just as advertised, almost just feels like Doodles, almost the way I work on these. And I think maybe the next stream will take a little break from this and probably just get back to just doing a straight up doodle. Straight up. See what I'm looking at here. This is going to be some water that's flowing. Maybe a few rabbits are catching light just out of frame. This edge. Sandbank is very dimly lit in there. A little more texture, definition. Maybe even some brighter sand in here in a couple places. Tempered a little bit. Deeper shadows. Edge, texture, shadows follow the rock a little bit better. I should really be using overlay for those ones. Alright, let's return to this. Let our shadows help create structures. Seems as though there's a shelf here. There wants to be one. That's a little better. I like this jagged edge here, actually. I like the way that falls. Give this shelf a little bit more size. Work with my shadows a little bit more here. Got this kind of fractured rock here. I like the idea that maybe it's even balancing, tipped, or cantilevered a little bit under a shelf. Wants to break free, but it didn't quite get all the way down. Maybe this is a little less stable of an area. Which gives me the idea that there might actually be more pieces and chunks of things that have already fallen down. And why not? Let's have some fun and put those in. stabilize this color in the background a little bit. Maybe some of these rocks are also just kind of hanging out in the shadows. I don't think they're pitching into anything underneath here though, so I think this isn't really a bona fide cave, it's just too dark to see into it. So there really should be maybe some texture in there to indicate that it's some reflective light that indicates that there's still something there. As I crawl all over my painting under every rock, decide what's under there, because I can. That would be something I would be doing as a kid whenever we visit a place. I'd be crawling under everything and trying to figure out what's under there. Looking, saying, okay, that's not a cave. I was obsessed with caves, and I always wanted to find one, and sometimes I did find something that was kind of like a cave, but I wouldn't say I ever discovered a true cavern, which must be thrilling. If not dangerous as well, but I've gotten to visit some caverns that are really cool. Really, caves. I have some books on caves. Learned about speleothems and how rocks and caves form and what it takes to explore a cave safely and all that stuff. And still kind of a long-term mission to do more cave exploring. Visiting caves. Whenever I go traveling or something, if I get the opportunity, I always like to say, oh, there's a local cavern, let's go check it out. I think my most recent cave adventure was in Ireland, actually, and explored a cave in Ireland. And it was just kind of under a cow pasture. On a road out in the countryside. Took the tour. Let's deal in overlay again. Create some fun highlights out of this stuff. Some shadows a bit, just a touch. Don't want to darken that too much. And then zoom out a little bit, see what our work is accomplished here. I like these little rocks down here. I think it does kind of remind me though that I need to de-isolate this pile a bit. Create a bit more of the same around. Maybe I don't need to go as ham on the details like I was though. Reminding myself where to work, coming in, and deciding on the shadow, working those shadows in pieces. These are so light, they should really put a little bit more of that on the other ones as well, so they don't seem so distinct. Even though they are kind of shadowed in. Zoom out a bit and take a look at things again. So, if this is indeed sand and it's piled up in these areas that are off, let me kind of create something to put some marks on here. If the sand over here is kind of piled up like it looks like, then it needs to be trained more in piles near the edges of these rocks, otherwise these just look like cookies with icing on them, which they most certainly are not. And the sand would be transferring down like this, here, here. So that needs to be, I think, a decision that needs to be done. Probably all the way down in here, and that will help actually bring all this together, I think. That's kind of what I'm seeing here. I think I'm going to take a short break and put the obligatory text here. I'll see you all in just a bit. Okay, I'm back. Let's continue. So I was thinking about this sand. So I have to develop kind of, I suppose, a rule. I'm not sure what this layer is, but let's merge it so we don't lose anything I may or may not see. Alright, so the rule. Let's test something here. We've got a pile of sand. Let's make sure it has a defined edge. Let's give it a slope. Let's taper the slope out. Make sure the light makes sense. How to draw a pile of sand by origin. I almost think this needs to be even higher than it is. Really give the eye or the viewer a solid understanding of what it is that I'm doing. And on the top, there needs to be an indication that this sand is really coming down here. And this is a fluid conduit for this sand. And it's just not quite piling up high enough to end up obscuring the edge. Just trying to get a darker shade here so I can create my sand hill. Give it more 3-dimension. Kind of defined edge. I can already tell there's going to be a phase where I'm just like, sand everywhere, sand! The opposite of Anakin Skywalker. I'm like, yay, sand. Let's play. Get it everywhere. It's coarse, dry, wonderful. Step back a bit. Too much of an edge. A little bit more definition here. Don't lose what gives the sand its perch. In fact, I really need to make sure that there is a reason why that sand stops there. It doesn't just continue down the cliff. And there's a little bit of sand though that is blown off, for sure. It's not that magic sand that just sticks together after all. I mean, it is kind of magic sand. It's magic desert sand. It's a magic desert. Make sure some sand is allowed to creep in. Yay, I'm playing with the sand. And there's still a shadow though. Soften the edge here a bit. Give it some shift. See, it says more sand and less just cookies with frosting. And in fact, I'm gonna break up some of this where I think it needs to look a little less like frosted cookies. Almost at a place tonight where I'm going to stop. This is very red rock, so a light layer of sand, you'd still see some of that red through it. And there would be more sand here, just to make the point that some sand would still be percolating down even down over here. And right here, it'd be beating the shadows back a bit. I think. Very calmly playing with sand. With friends. Sounds like a good time to me. Just like old times. Give this rock a little bit more of a face on the top. And I suppose this slope really should be broken just a bit to make more sense with the way the rock would be formed and eroded. And it gives us something a little bit more to fix on, I think. Maybe there's even maybe a little bit of fracture here across the surface. I don't see why that edge needs to be so bright. It makes it a little bit more interesting. It's always kind of hard with a scene like this, like to make it some features stand out when everything seems to look so similar, covered in sand. You need to have very subtle variations, but then in other places very stark indications. Like if this sand isn't violently pouring down, then this edge of this rock needs to be a lot more solid looking, I think, and just kind of fade the sand in. Beat back the sand a bit. Bring my edge up. Indicate that it's not quite out to the edge. I love these experiments. And dry up the surface of this rock a bit more. Dry, as though the sand is wet. Then we have more of a pile. It just tapers out over the rock, like this. Oh, you had a nice nap. That's nice. Painting's looking pretty good. I was just experimenting with how to make these rocks look more like there's sand just kind of pouring over the sides and less like frosted cookies. It's gonna take some time. I'm almost reaching the end, I think, of this stream. And then we'll pick this up again next time. Or maybe work on a doodle next time, something totally new, and then come back to this in a subsequent stream. We have all the time in the world, friends, to play with sand. I like adding some little edges on top of rocks, because they are, rough surfaces after all. They're not perfectly flat slabs. think I've worked out some rules over here for how to deal with the sand that is moving into this area, and I'll apply that next time, I think. So, friends, let's save, and I will leave it here. Thank you all so much for joining me tonight, and I hope you have a nice night, nice evening, nice sleep, or good morning, and a wonderful day ahead of you. This is Origin. Goodbye.